The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus told his disciples a parable about the necessity for them to pray always without becoming weary. He said, "There was a judge in a certain town who neither feared God nor respected any human being. And a widow in that town used to come to him and say, 'Render a just decision for me against my adversary.' For a long time the judge was unwilling, but eventually he thought, 'While it is true that I neither fear God nor respect any human being, because this widow keeps bothering me, I shall deliver a just decision for her, lest she finally come and strike me.' The Lord said, 'Pay attention to what the dishonest judge says. Will not God then secure the rights of his chosen ones who call out to him day and night? Will he be slow to answer them? I tell you, he will see to it that justice is done for them speedily. But when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Personally, this may be one of my favorite little parables that Jesus ever tells, just because of the visual that my imagination conjures up around this story of the unjust judge and the persistent widow. I mean, I picture the judge as sort of a man who's kind of obese in his big robes and a little pillbox hat, like, "I don't respect God or any human being." And then there's the widow who's about this tall, hunched over, very withered, who insists on getting her way. Right? And the story is so humorous. I'm sure Jesus' listeners would have loved it, because while our translation says that the judge is afraid she's going to strike him, more literally, he's concerned she's going to poke him in the eye. Hey, okay, have what you want, have what you want. I just think comically it's wonderful, but it has a very powerful message as well. I think we need to keep in mind the sort of commentary that Luke gives us before he tells us the parable. And he says, Jesus told his disciples a parable about the necessity of praying always without becoming weary. It's not a parable just about praying always, being persistent or persevering in prayer, but about not becoming weary, or some translations, not losing heart. And I think, given that, this parable and the other readings today speak, at least to me, very powerfully at this point in history in the world. So we have this judge, and we quickly come to hear from Christ that there is no good side to the man to appeal to. He doesn't respect God nor any human being, so he's just got no good side at which the widow can appeal to. And she really becomes for us the embodiment of what Jesus taught earlier in Luke chapter 6 when he talks about loving your enemies. She becomes the embodiment of pray for those who maltreat you. So apparently, it's important for us to engage in prayer when we are faced with injustice, especially injustice that seems to go on forever, and especially when we're powerless to do anything to change it. To pray for those who do have the power, that perhaps their heart will be transformed and justice will come upon the earth through them. So the widow's like this, I don't know, New Testament prototype Energizer bunny. She just doesn't stop. You get the impression that it's sort of like two 10-year-olds in a staring contest, and one of them is eventually going to blink. And since this widow probably has nothing else to lose, it's not going to be her. And sure enough, I love the fact that she finds a way to get to the judge. Not because he fears God or respects human beings. She gets him in the one place he's vulnerable, his own self-interest. His own peace and quiet is important to him. I'm going to give her what she wants before she pokes me in the eye. She's driving me crazy. In a sense, this widow, who makes her prayer very public and quite annoying, eventually makes it easier for the judge to do the right thing than to keep on doing the wrong thing. Through her persistence, she makes it easier for the judge to do the right thing than to keep doing the wrong thing. In a very real sense, in that way, it's a story of salvation. It's a story of salvation. Her persistence in prayer makes the difference. Much like Moses in the first reading today. As you know, after God had freed the people from slavery in Egypt, they went into the Sinai desert for about 40 years. Well, as you might imagine, when you introduce an entire nation of people into a barren wilderness where the nomadic tribes that already live there are having a hard time scratching out a living, the introduction of this new nation is not very welcome. And so the nomadic tribes tried to drive Israel out. Get away, leave us alone. And today we hear about how Amalek and the Amalekites come against Israel to make war. And Moses says, okay, Joshua, you take the men, you go out there, you fight. I'm going to go up here on the hill, and I will pray for our victory. And as long as his hands are extended in prayer, Israel has the better of the fight. But when he gets tired and his arms fall, so does his army. So he gets some help. Aaron and Hur come along like crutches for his arms, and they hold him up. And as long as he prays, Israel's victorious. And eventually, his persistence in prayer, his perseverance, gives Israel its very first military victory. He's an example of perseverance in prayer for us, with the help of others. Then we have our second reading, Paul to Timothy, which echoes the same sort of message. Paul says to Timothy, be persistent in preaching the word, whether it's convenient or inconvenient. It's what you need to do. So there you are, all very fine. Examples of how to persevere and be persistent in our faith, persevere and be persistent in prayer. We've probably heard it before. Whether or not we've incorporated it into our life is another question, but at least we know the message. So, what now? Well, I don't know about you, but there's one line in the gospel, the last line, the question that Jesus throws down that caught me short. And hopefully at least made you raise an eyebrow and wonder, what is that about? And after telling this story about the unjust judge and the widow, he says, but when the Son of Man comes, will he find any faith on earth? Will he find any faith on earth? Is there anyone who will not have grown weary? Is there anyone who will not have lost heart? Is there anyone who will still persevere in prayer? Will he find faith on earth? And in my own life, I think I have a more profound understanding of that question right now than I've ever had before. Because sometimes, there's a feeling of, is God paying attention? And is it really worth continuing to pray when I'm not seeing any results? You know what I'm talking about. We're in the midst of a pretty horrific political season. In my opinion, we have two leading presidential candidates, neither of whom have a well-formed moral conscience. Day after day after day, there's revelation of new scandal, more scandal, additional scandal. And in the talking head commentators, on Facebook, on Twitter, people actually try to rationalize and excuse behaviors for which there is no rationalization and no excuse. The tenor of the conversation has become so nasty and so vile that no one's actually having conversation. It's just accusation and stance-taking and just being mean. I'm almost done with Facebook and Twitter and all those things. I just don't want to see that anymore. I mean, one of them, even, one of the major parties, to reveal things that we're backward Catholics. Hello, backward Catholics. I'm fine being a backward Catholic because look where I'm facing. That works for me. On top of that, if you didn't hear this week, the governor of Aleppo in Syria, or the mayor, said that in Aleppo, they are living daily genocide. And it's been going on for years. Right now, as Russia bombs that city day after day after day, there was an attempt to have a break in the war for at least a week, just a week, that's all they asked for, so that supplies could be rushed into the children, the women, the innocent men, the families who are losing their lives, losing their livelihood every day. It didn't even last 2 days. Didn't even last 2 days to get help to people. We're years into ISIS still slaughtering Christians, still seeking to kill anyone who does not believe in their very narrow and ridiculous way of worshiping God. Still that's happening. Not to mention the tenor of the conversation, the aggression around moral issues that are pulling this country down and apart. And then in my own life, the number of people who I am aware of because of my role as priest and pastor who are suffering and have been suffering for years with illness, be it mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. So many cases where things just continue to spiral downward no matter how hard people try to turn it around, that make you wonder, where are you, God, and what are you doing? And I could go on and on and on with examples. Will there be faith on earth? Can you persevere? Can you persist without losing heart? And so I think we as a people of faith have a choice to make. We can either choose to believe that God is not trustworthy, that all that he has promised us about a land of justice and hope and joy is just a joke, and that Jesus' admonitions to us to pray always is just to bring us discouragement and frustration. Or we can choose to believe that God is trustworthy, and that even though we're not seeing the results we would like to see, and we're not having the experience of his nearness to us, that somehow he is at work, and that the one who called us from nothingness into existence will keep his promises, and there will be justice and mercy and redemption. And I think our choice has to be based upon the character of God, not upon what we are feeling, not upon whether or not we're seeing the results that we would like to see, but on the character of God. Do we trust him? The great Christian theologian Oswald Chambers once said, you need to pray with your eyes on God, not on your difficulties. Can we trust God? Can our very existence, when everything seems to be heading for darkness, be an absolute act of trust? Can we, along with Jesus, pray, my God, why have you abandoned me? And yet then turn around and still say, but into your hands I commend my spirit. I trust you even though I don't feel you, even though I don't see you, even though I'm not getting the results I want. It seems to me that if we stop trying, if we stop trusting, then faith loses. And we all know people who have chosen to stop, whether they've gradually faded away or made the decision deliberately. Faith loses. But as long as we're laboring at faith, as long as we're striving to persevere and persist, as long as we don't allow ourselves to grow weary, faith wins. It's not overcome. So the decision is rooted in this simple question: do you trust God? Are your eyes fixed on Him or on your problems? As long as we persevere, faith wins.